All right. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Tom Jordan, registered dietitian. And Tom, I'm going to let you go ahead and take it away, and I'm going to start sharing the screen here.
Okay. Am I coming through okay?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. If you guys can go ahead and type in yes if you can hear Tom clearly.
All right.
Awesome. All right, let me get this going here, and you just let me know when you need me to roll through the slides.
Okay. Well, also, thank you guys for having me tonight. It's a great opportunity to chat with you, and I love this topic. I kind of got into nutrition through sports and athletics, and along the way, kind of found a passion for running. So this is one of my favorite topics, and I'm just really excited to dive in. So I do a lot of one-on-one coaching and for nutrition coaching, helping whether it's a weight loss goal or a marathon goal. But I'm just going to kind of pull the high notes, I think, and we've done this in the past, and I think I have a tendency to kind of get a little bit too in depth. So I'm going to shoot for erring on the side of uh, basic tonight, as opposed to getting way super into a topic. So if anybody does have any questions, definitely, if there's something I'm skimming over and you want me to hit it a little bit more, definitely go ahead and hit that on the chat, and we'll dig in a little bit deeper. But so we're starting from the top. We're gonna hit the macronutrients first, and look at carbs, fats, proteins. I think it's pretty easy to sell somebody on protein, so I like to start on carbs. So carbs, when we talk about carbs, we're looking basically for starchy stuff. So starchy foods. And I just kind of pulled this image because it kind of gives you an idea of the gamut that we're looking at. Whole grains, fruit are going to be carbs. And then we're also looking at like starchy vegetables. And also our non-starchy vegetables do have a little bit of carbohydrates in it. So when we talk about simple carbs, we're talking about things that are digested super easy, like the cookie on the left, or the soda is already down to like a sugar form, where that's going to be absorbed in a couple minutes, versus like a sweet potato or whole grain bread might take like an hour or hour and a half to actually break that down. So it's all going to end up as sugar that we can use for fuel. But as you can see, like the stuff on the right is going to have a little bit more nutrient density, and we have a little bit more time to use it. The stuff on the left is a little bit more stripped down. And we're going to talk a little bit too about carbs and when we do want a little bit simpler versions too. So we can go ahead and jump to the next screen. Wanted to hit this, the term glycogen, because that's very specific to marathon running. If you're at a very low intensity, like right now, I'm in a seated position. I'm pretty relaxed. I'm mainly burning fat as a fuel. But as we go into like a walk, we're still burning fat. A conditioned athlete that's doing like a light jog is still primarily fat. But as higher intensities, we start to burn carbs more. So in a marathon, we're going to burn carbohydrates because we're exercising at a relatively high intensity, and start breaking down glycogen. So we have enough glycogen to last about an hour and a half. If we were to go run very, very hard for an hour and a half, we got about enough glycogen to fuel that. But when we run out of glycogen, that's when we are hitting the wall. So the whole game in the marathon then is to prevent that from happening, right? So this is one of my favorite graphs. If you take a look at this graph, like basically what they did was they took college students, and this was soccer players, and they ran them like dogs through practice for 2 hours, and that's all the way on the left. So they depleted their glycogen levels, and then they gave one group, the group in red, got a high carbohydrate diet. And as you can see, like after practice, they were depleted. They got a high carbohydrate diet. Over the next 24 hours, they were restocking their glycogen levels. Then they ran hard again next day, 2 hour practice, depleted, came back, depleted, came back. The other group, the turquoise or the blue or whatever that is, was given a low carbohydrate diet. So 2 hour soccer practice or training session, and then low carbohydrate diet, as you would imagine. They weren't able to restock their glycogen. Day 2, they come in and deplete it further. Day 3, they deplete it further. By the end of day 3, these kids are struggling. Like they're not feeling well. Their performance is hindered just because they have no fuel. So that's a good, just a nice graph to show, the importance of carbohydrates, because as much as carbs can tend to get a bad rap, they're going to be important. And that doesn't mean we do still want to make sure we're not going overboard, not having too many, and timing it correctly. But we really want to make sure that we're kind of boosting glycogen levels before a workout. During a workout, we'll talk about some carbohydrate intake during. The idea of that is to make sure that we're not having that decline. Had these athletes been given some carbohydrates during the workout, they wouldn't have had quite as much of a tank, because it would have leveled off a little bit. And then after the workout, then our primary focus, of course, is like what the group in the red did, is to restock glycogen. So how to apply that then? Before, we need a little bit of carbohydrates. So like a light meal would be fine, like a granola bar or a banana. And from a timing perspective, we want enough time to be able to digest it. So if it's something simple like a banana, we're looking for like 30 to 45 minutes. If it's a little bit more of a regular meal, like a ham sandwich or peanut butter and jelly sandwich, something like that, high fiber breakfast cereal, we're probably looking at more like an hour to an hour and a half. So that's beforehand. During, high fiber foods are great for providing bulk and digesting slowly, but during a workout, you don't want that. We want as simple as we can be. So we're looking, that's where the like gels and sports drinks come into play, because they're essentially, a sports drink is just salt and water. Like that's all that's in it. But I'm sorry, salt, sugar, and water. But if we think about what we're burning sugar, we're sweating salt, and we're losing water. So that's exactly what we need. So very, very simple carbs during a workout. And then post-workout is where we're trying to restock those carbs. And then I just threw a little question on here as far as the rest of the day. We do still want some carbohydrates, but I try to kind of shift carbohydrate intake a little bit closer to the workout. So those folks who are typically working out late in the day, I would probably have them doing like a breakfast that's more like eggs and like scrambled eggs with some veggies maybe, which is more fat and protein, versus if they were, and then kind of shift your carbohydrate intake later in the day, versus somebody who's exercising in the morning, working out in the morning. That might be like a real kind of a simple breakfast cereal to get some easy carbs in the morning. And then at night, then I'm saying, okay, let's shift to more like veggies and protein, like having salmon and asparagus. So kind of that's kind of the concept there, is kind of shifting those carbohydrates closer to the workout. Moving on to protein. I was kind of pulling some different images, and I was interested when I was looking for these that there was a lot of images of like there were vegetables, and nuts do show up a lot, but generally there's and also like of course beans, but generally like you're going to get the most protein from meat, and that doesn't mean that we have to eat meat to get protein. There are definitely vegetarian protein sources, but if we look at, like, I don't know if anybody's logged their food before. If you log, like MyFitnessPal is nice because it'll show you a graph of like what percentage of calories are coming from fat, protein, carbohydrates. And what's interesting is if you just log peanut butter and then look at your graph, you see that peanut butter is only about 16% protein. So it only gives you about 16% of the calories from protein. Whereas like our goal for the day, typically I'm shooting for like 20 or 30% for the day. So a food that we typically think is high protein is actually lower protein than we'd want to average for the day. So meat is, of course, a good source. Eggs. There is going to be some protein in beans and nuts, but for our vegetarians, it's a lot of times where for a marathon runner is going to need a little bit more protein than a sedentary person. One, because they need more calories. Two, because they're breaking tissue down. You're breaking down muscle tissue when you're working out. So, like a vegetarian protein source, like and typically we're looking for something that's got like rice and pea, because rice is short in one of the amino acids and peas are short in one amino acid. But if you combine them, you do get a complementary protein. And as far as why we need it, protein is very important for a lot of things. First and foremost, the one I think we're pretty well aware of is muscle. Like muscle is made of protein, so we use amino acids from breaking down the protein to repair muscle. We need it for hormone production. If our hormones are off, then because we're protein deficient, then we're not going to perform well. In any sport, let alone something very catabolic like running. Immune function, of course, is important. It requires protein. And then one thing we typically will overlook is if you're getting enough protein, that does help optimize carb too. So, and that's a good note for balance. Like if people look at carbs and say, oh my gosh, carbs are really good, let's eat a whole bunch of them, they run into issues. Same thing with protein. Like if you say, okay, protein is great, let's just have chicken 5 times a day, we're going to create imbalances. So, and also protein is going to be good for stabilizing blood sugar levels. If you eat, and the example I'll use there is if you have a potato, potato's going to raise your blood sugar relatively quickly. So it kind of gets a bad rap because it's said that it's high glycemic. But if you combine it with a protein, which we do, right? Like rarely are we going to eat a potato by itself. The combining it with the protein kind of slows things down and blunts that increase in blood sugar. So it helps stabilize blood sugars when we're including protein in our snacks. And then one thing I really wanted to note too on protein is that we get a response to protein intake. Like our body will start to generate muscle tissue in response to taking in protein. So that's good. Obviously a runner is going to say, well, I don't want to bulk up, but it's pretty unlikely that you're going to build upper body muscle unless you're actually doing something to like lifting heavy weights and taking in excess calories, which but so generating protein is good because that's going to help us with the recovery. So protein synthesis in response to a meal, if we take in 10 grams of protein, that gives us a little bit of a response. 20 grams is more, 30 grams is more at a meal. 40 grams is where it kind of tails off. Like you really don't get more out of 40 grams than you would out of 30 grams. So 30 grams would be like having a meal with like 3 ounces of meat, or like a protein shake. You have 1 scoop of protein powder and like a cup of milk or something. So 30 grams of protein is not a ton of protein, but that's about the maximum protein synthesis that we can get following a meal. So the takeaway point here is I would rather see somebody take in 30 grams of protein 5 times a day, or let's say 20 grams of protein 5 times a day, which only equals 100 total, versus have them eat 60 grams of protein 3 times a day, which is 180. So it's obviously more, but they're only getting that rise in protein synthesis 3 times a day, versus if we get 20 or 30 grams 5 times a day, you get that benefit 5 times. So that's why I'm a big proponent of the small frequent meals. And if you're really looking for protein to help recover, that 30 grams of protein is what we're looking for. And then during a workout too. Just to kind of one extra little tidbit in here, during a workout for as far as protein goes, protein's a little bit too complex to be breaking down in a workout. So we're probably not having a protein shake in a workout, but branch chain amino acids are it's a component of protein. So we get 21 different amino acids. 3 of them are the branch chain amino acids, so BCAAs, if you've ever heard of those. And bodybuilders will use these to during the workout to break to stop or to reduce muscle breakdown. But if you think about it, like runners, that's one of the biggest things that we have a problem with is running is catabolic, meaning that it's breaking down muscle tissue. So we're losing muscle tissue during these workouts. So finally, runners figured out, hey, if I take some BCAAs in, then I won't have quite as much muscle breakdown during the workout. And then shifting to fat, I definitely want to. I'll kind of give you the short version here. When you're exercising, we talked about muscle glycogen. We want to try to not burn off our muscle glycogen. So the better you can get at burning fat, the more efficient you are at burning fat, the better you're going to be able to utilize that in the marathon. What that translates to is you're preserving your muscle glycogen levels. So you're not going to be breaking down that muscle glycogen. A couple ways we can do this. There's 2 key things to really hone in on here. Is one is just like running, right? Like if you want to get faster or you want to get more endurance, you run more, right? Your body figures out that it starts to adapt to running. If we want to burn fat more, then consuming a higher fat diet will condition our body to get better at burning fat. And that doesn't mean that I'm, like when the Mediterranean diet came out, everybody thought, okay, we need olive oil. So what did we do? We took our standard American diet, the SAD diet, the SAD diet, which is very sad, right? Standard American diet. And they just dumped a bottle of olive oil on it. So that's not what we're looking for, right? The Mediterranean diet is basically you're replacing some of those processed carbs, like you're pulling some of those processed carbs out and replacing them with healthy fats. So that's what we're looking for here, is not just to add fat on top of what we're currently doing, but if we could have nuts for a snack rather than a granola bar. So having a fat and fiber versus a carbohydrate snack, or nuts instead of a banana. But shifting towards and definitely what I want to make sure I hit on here is just making sure that people are not scared of fat. Like they're not avoiding high fat foods because they think they're going to be bad for them because they could be doing damage because they're not going to be as good at burning fat. And you could become a very, very good carb burner, but a very, very good carb burner is going to run out of muscle glycogen 2 hours into the race. And I think I have some fats on the next slide. Some examples. And I found a couple other images. This one's interesting because it seems like there's a little bit more of a shift to butter was always on my bad fat list because it's high in saturated fat. I was a little bit slow to get on the coconut oil bandwagon, but now I'm all over it. Like I think coconut oil is a fantastic option because it was high in saturated fat. We were always taught that saturated fat produces inflammation and it raises cholesterol levels and all that. But I love what the bottom of his image says. It says nature doesn't make bad fats, factories do. I'm like, I think he really hit it on the head there, that processed oils and especially trans fats like fried foods and things like that are you can't possibly make a case for those being good for health. Like they're very damaging to health. They trigger inflammation, and inflammation is what essentially causes most of the chronic disease processes that we face. Like the things that are killing Americans are cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, stroke, COPD, and they're all inflammatory based. And now we're getting more like Alzheimer's and getting into that stuff, which is also has a origin there. So one of the biggest things we can do for our health, in terms of just general health and anything that makes us healthier, is going to make us a better runner too, because it makes us more able to deal with stress and respond to trauma. Essentially, that we're putting our body through physical trauma in the idea that we're going to respond to that trauma and get stronger. So anything we can do to improve our health is going to improve our running, and healthy fats is one of the biggest things we can do to flip the switch from promotion of disease to prevention of disease. And on that list, if I get one of those items on the left, which one am I picking? What would be the most powerful on that list? Anybody has a guess there?
You're putting us on the spot, Tom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does anybody have a guess?
So
Type it in.
eggs. So yeah, I like the eggs answer, because eggs are also going to have protein. Like that's actually the only one on there that has protein. So that was a good one. Fish oil. Yep, I'm going with fish oil. So that's going to be my pick. And the reason for fish oil, I think omega-3s have gotten a really good rap, and so omega-3s are fantastic for decreasing inflammation. And where this kind of came about initially was Eskimos. Eskimos are unique population because they carry excess body weight. They are pretty sedentary, and they get zero heart attacks, like at all. Like they don't get heart attacks at all. And French paradox too. The French there's a paradox there because they smoke, they drink, they don't exercise, um, and the Italians, Italians are eating a ton of pasta over in the Mediterranean, and they do all the things that should cause cardiovascular disease, and they get very little. And the reason is because their diet is very high in omega-3s. So omega-3s are very protective of the heart. When we look at brain health and we look at prevention of some of the neuro degenerative diseases, omega-3s come in good there. I mean, we talk about blood pressure, we talk about depression, we talk about host of different things. So fish oil is good, not because there's something magical about fish oil, but because it's one of the highest foods that we have in terms of omega-3 content. So I'm definitely a proponent of including fish into our diet or supplementing with fish oil. So of all the nutrients, I remember this was 7th grade science class. We were learning all the essential nutrients, and I was into this because I was already into nutrition. And I remember the most essential nutrient, that was the question, was water. And the reason is because we can go days and quite some time without carbohydrates, and we can really go. Most of us have enough body fat to last a solid month, if not a little bit longer, without calories. But we have about 48 hours of life in us if we don't get any water. So water is obviously very essential. Dehydration can happen fast, and typically, if you're focused on running, you're not going to be able to consume a lot of fluid. So our capacity for excreting fluid or sweating and losing fluid is greater than our capacity to take it in. And also even a 1% fluid loss, meaning, and that means body weight. So a 150-pound individual losing about 1.5 pounds of water, that sounds like a lot. I'm a heavy sweater. Like I sweat, I would say it's safe to say profusely. So on a hot day, I mean, it's not difficult for me if I forget my water bottle to lose 10 or 12 pounds in an hour if it was a hot and humid day. Typically post workout, even if I'm consuming water, I'm down about 2 or 3 unless I'm really focusing on it. So we 1% fluid loss will impair performance, and thirst is a pretty bad indicator. Like typically most of us have a pretty poor thirst response anyway. But usually by the time you get thirsty, it's way too late. Like if you're thirsty, you're probably pretty dehydrated. And of course, the benefits of staying hydrated I don't think this is tough pitch here. I mean, we know that, it's good for the brain, but think about like everything in the body happens in an aqueous environment. So we have to have fluids um, to make any chemical reaction we make in the body. So if we decrease the amount of fluid we have available, we decrease our capacity for chemical reactions, which is including metabolism. So human metabolism goes down. And that's the first question I ask somebody. If they say, you know what, I'm feeling tired. If they say I'm feeling tired, I'm feeling hungry, I always ask the first thing is hydration, because it's one of the easiest things we can address and one of the most common. And then on the next slide, we're going to hit signs of dehydration. Obviously, I said like thirst is a pretty bad indicator, but all of these things, like if you just kind of had a bad run, and it seems pretty obvious, like if somebody, like if I got home and I'm like, I just wasn't feeling it. My wife said, well, are you dehydrated? I'm like, yeah, come on. I know better than to get dehydrated. But most of us, I mean, it's pretty easy to do, right? So if you have an off day, or let's say heart rate's just running a little bit high, higher than normal, like I usually run at whatever my training pace is, and my heart rate would be, say, 153. But today I'm slower than that pace, and my heart rate's 160. Like, first question I always just ask, are we dehydrated? But these are some of the things will experience from dehydration. None of which are good for performance, right? As far as like hydration goes, generally, if it's I would say less than 30 minutes, I tend to go to carbohydrate fluids relatively quick. So 30 to 45 minutes, you're definitely fine with water. Like, you do not need Gatorade to get you through a 45-minute easy recovery run. If it's over 60 minutes, definitely some form of carbohydrates. I say Gatorade, just that's kind of my go-to. Some people have a hard time with that, so a little bit softer, trying to think of the, like, Tailwind seems to be a common one. I know, Seth, you have tried a lot of different options, right?
Yeah, and I'm a full disclosure a Noon ambassador, so so I'm a big proponent of Noon as well. But yeah, Tailwind has worked well for a lot of people, and obviously Gatorade is what's going to be on course for most of these races.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I kind of said before too, the I love the Gatorade commercials, because they talk about science and sports science, and I'm like, man, it's salt and sugar dissolved in water. But essentially that's what we need. And like, when you're looking at these, like, we definitely don't want something that's too concentrated, because if it's too concentrated, the nice thing about like an 8-ounce serving, if an 8-ounce serving has about 15 grams of carbohydrates, and around 100 to 200 milligrams of sodium. Like, those are the two numbers. That consistency, or that osmolality, is about the same as blood, as our blood. And the reason that's important is because that's really easy to get across the lining of the small intestine. So it goes into the small intestine, it's absorbed into the bloodstream. If it's the same osmolality as our blood, it's really easy to pass through. So there's not a lot of work to be done. If I'm like, I need some carbohydrates during my workout, so I'm going to eat a potato, right? Like, I'm going to have to digest that, and I'm going to have to deal with that. So that's general rule is for a 8-ounce serving. So if it was a 16-ounce water bottle, and I was putting 2 scoops of Noon in there, I'd want around 30 grams of carbohydrates for 16 ounces. So and can be a little bit less, and also I would play with it too. Some people, that's a little bit too much for them, but so I would always defer to what works best for you. Like, if you went for a run and 1 scoop was good, and then you tried 2 and it wasn't, and then you tested it again and got the same response, I will surely tell you that my little 30 grams of carbohydrate rule just got trumped by your body. So do what works well for you, but that would be kind of a starting point for that. And then also, the one thing to think about too, like post run, like have you weigh in. Do this once in a while just to kind of get it, just kind of gauge it. Weigh in before your run, and then after your run, weigh in again. Kind of keep an eye on how much you consumed in fluids. Of course, if you went to the bathroom, that's going to throw our number off if you stop to go to the bathroom in the middle. But if you lost weight during your run, like if you lost a pound, you definitely did not lose a pound of body weight. Like any weight that you shift during a workout is fluid. So drives my I have a workout class on Fridays, and we weigh in every Friday. They weigh in every Friday, and they'll weigh in before and after, and it drives them insane because they're like, I just worked out for an hour and I'm heavier. And I'll look at their water bottle and I'm like, you have a 30-ounce water bottle and it's empty. So I'm like, that 32 ounces weighs 2 pounds. So, and then of course they figured that out. So then they stopped drinking water during their workout. So I had to put the weigh in before the workout so that they would do that. But anyway, the moral of the story here: weigh in before you run, weigh in after, and that's going to give you an idea of where you're sitting fluid balance wise. The goal would be to finish your run at the same weight as or close to as what you started. Some people are not able to consume that much fluid. For some people, it's easy because they don't sweat a whole heck of a lot. So, and then if you are low, we're looking for about 2 cups of fluid for every pound of body weight lost. So 2 to 3 cups. If you lost 2 pounds, that means we need 32 to 48 ounces of fluid post workout. So to kind of put this back together and look at the big picture, the big picture here, we want to be eating regularly, so fueling ourselves every 3 to 4 hours, eating a balance and variety of foods. We're going to get different nutrients from all different foods. So while I would never give somebody a hard time for eating a absurd amount of vegetables, I want to make sure that they're getting some healthy fat and protein in as well. Generally focusing on whole grains or complex carbohydrates. And then a real quick note to experiment during training, like anything you're going to do on marathon day should have been practiced several times and practiced in your long run. Like if you read an article about beet juice the day before the marathon, and you're like, oh my gosh, this looks great, let's try it. It is, and I'm a huge fan of beet juice, and that's one thing I would definitely tell you to try and do. But if you read that article the day before your race, don't do it. Do experiment with what you're going to do in training. Don't try something new on race day. Pre-race meal. I liked this image. I saw this image and I'm like, you know what? There's a problem with this image here, and all those foods are healthy. They're good foods, but the one note I would make, like if you're doing a marathon and you're pretty serious about your time, if your goal is to finish, then I'm not too worried about it because you can handle a bathroom break during the race, right? I know like my goal. Is I'm right around 3 hours. So for me, I put a lot of emphasis on not having to go to the bathroom, like timing my fluids so that I'm gonna be able to go 3 hours throughout the day without having to go to the bathroom, because that's the difference between a 2:59 and a 3:01. Getting stuck there because I'm going to be pretty tight. It's going to take everything I got to get under 3. So the note there is going to be what I learned the hard way was all of those high fiber carbohydrate foods like sweet potatoes and whole grain pancakes and pizza with a whole bunch of arugula and spinach on there. A lot of fiber the day before a marathon is not a particularly good idea. So I will go to like a more of a low residue diet the day before the marathon, and at least say from like noon on. So I'm probably not having, I don't know what that is in the upper right, but like sweet potatoes and beans. Beans would definitely not be a great idea. The 2 days, so we'll hit carb loading here in a second, but 2 days prior, sure, go to town, have as much fiber as you want, but day before, probably back off a little bit. And then the pre-workout meal, like on race day, definitely should be easily digestible. So low fiber, low fat, something that's going to be digested pretty easy. Like maybe pancakes would be fine, but I would in this case do probably like a plain pancake. I like rice. Rice is a super simple food, and then I still feel like I'm eating something healthy. So rice or maybe like a basic breakfast cereal. Pushing the fluids. One just real quick note on the fluids and prevention of bathroom breaks. Um, I try to push fluids pretty hard about 2 hours prior, and then about 90 minutes before the race, I'll really slow down. So I want to really push the fluids 2 hours prior, and the reason for that is any extra fluids that you have are going to be cleared out through the kidneys, right? We're going to have to go to the bathroom. It takes about an hour and a half. So I want to be overhydrated, but I don't want the first marathon I did. I dove into a porta john at mile 2. Like I was super well hydrated. I was chugging water the whole time, and then the race started. And about 4 seconds into the race, I'm like, oh no, and I made it until mile 2. So then I had to stop, and then I stopped like 3 or 4 times in that one. So carbohydrate loading. Just gonna hit carb loading real quick. They found this out uh, Finland, the Swedes or the Finland figured this out in the 70s, and they did a really restrictive, like they would restrict the carbohydrate levels and essentially try to get that blue line there, the blue line folks, for 3 days, and then they would pound carbohydrates for about 3 or 4 days before the competitive event. And what happens then is, like, you see the red line coming back up to normal, we get super compensation. So we can actually elevate our glycogen levels about 20% higher, 10 to 20% higher than we would normally. So we're getting to about 110 or 120%. So if that person could go, let's say we have about 300 to 400 grams of carbs stored in our body. Endurance athletes are going to have a little bit more because they train their body to do that. But let's say the number is 400. If you could load carbs and get that up to about 440 or 480, that's an extra 200 calories worth of carbohydrates that's stored in the body. That's going to extend our, we're not hitting the wall. So, but the modified, what they figured out through numerous research studies was that you don't have to be that restrictive. So you're not going to quite get the bump in that the Finland guys were doing. But if you just kind of curtail your carbohydrates for 3 days a little bit, and then really dial it up for 3 days, and that's where I think it's funny to see these. We're going to do the pre-run pasta dinner, and that's when people are going to carb load. Carb loading for me starts on Thursday morning at 6 o'clock. So Thursday, Friday, because for whatever reason, most marathons are typically on a Sunday. It seems, but I would do my last kind of a walk through run with a couple miles at race pace, and then backing off on Thursday morning, and then as soon as that's over, dialing in on carbs for Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Thursday, Friday, we're talking a whole bunch of sweet potatoes, maybe whole grain pasta, stuff like that. Lots of starchy vegetables like peas and corn and beans. So it's all healthy food. And then on Saturday, that's where I would kind of dial back, and I'm going more simple stuff. So simple things that are going to be digested easily, don't have a whole heck of a lot of fiber. Like I mentioned, beet juice, like I'm consuming pretty significant amounts of beet juice as some of my carb loading on the day before, but it probably sounds really gross to people, but you try it. It's not that bad. So that's our carb loading, but think about carb loading as more of a 3-day process than it's not the night before. During the marathon, we've been hitting this. We're looking for, we want some sugar, some very simple sugar so that you can burn that while you're running, not burning that protective glycogen that we have. So it'll spare muscle glycogen. We need it to be easily digestible for you. You know, I could say I love this particular product because it works well for me. That doesn't matter. So find something that works for you. And then it should have around like 100 to 200 milligrams of sodium. And the reason that we want sodium, as much as we're told that salt is bad for us, water follows salt. So if you're drinking a high salt fluid, it does two things. One, it encourages you to drink more. They'll do studies where they give people a sports drink and water and give them no information. Just say, you just do whatever you're going to do. Just run on this treadmill for an hour. They find that people will consume more fluid if there's sodium. So, and once that fluid goes in, we hold on to it a little bit better versus if we're just chugging water, then we're losing, we're losing it a little quicker. Recovery meals. So post workout, I like this image because it had we had some pasta in there, we have some protein, um, and that's essentially what we're looking for. We're looking for carbs post workout. We want some carbs to stimulate recovery. This is the one time that we want to stimulate insulin to help because it'll help us recover, and a little bit of protein for recovery too for the muscles. So um, I shoot for as close to the workout as possible. Um, it doesn't have to be within 15 minutes. I know some people there's no way they could consume fluids or food that quickly. But definitely within the first 2 hours. So, and then I would also say another meal or snack about 2 hours after that. And we're looking for, so we're just looking for carbs, protein, and fluids post workout. Just a quick shot on vitamins and minerals. One, athletes are typically their nutrient needs are higher because are their metabolism is higher. They're burning more calories. They're repairing tissues. So they definitely are going to need more nutrients. Typically, they're eating more calories, so it's possible that an athlete might meet all of their nutrient needs. For me, I would rather just not roll the dice. I might be getting enough vitamin C from my food, but if I supplement that with a good multivitamin, then I feel a little bit better about it. Definitely vitamin C or I'm sorry, vitamin D and magnesium. Like those are the two that we're just not getting enough of. Like you could try and eat a diet high in healthy foods, but those are two nutrients that we definitely need to supplement with. And um, that's just kind of my go-to. I like the lifetime multivitamin, the AM PM, because it's the only one that I've really seen that has an AM version and a PM. And the AM is a little bit more of the energy producing nutrients in the morning, and then PM will give you more of the nutrients that we need for deep restful sleep. But regardless of what we're doing, like a multivitamin, don't do the one a day or Centrum. I mean, I don't have anything particularly against those brands other than they just don't absorb. Like there was a study that showed that taking a multivitamin wasn't really helping people's health. And I'm like, I totally agree, because this was a demographic study where you took 100,000 people and said the question was, do you take a multivitamin? And people that checked yes went into one group. But we know, I mean, it's going to be clear that most of those people checking yes were probably taking a Centrum multivitamin or whatever it is, that wasn't really doing much. So we're looking for reputable brand. If you can find like an AM PM, and it should be a capsule, so not a tablet. So a tablet is going to be harder to dissolve because it's bound. The nutrients are bound. But a capsule will actually break apart and release. And so people will see these lifetime vitamins that, like, oh my gosh, they're expensive, and which I don't think they're that much. I mean, I think maybe like $38 which is a lot more than the $9 Walmart version. but and they have to take a lot of them. So there's like 3 in the morning, 3 at night, so which is a deterrent for people. But a good multivitamin that's giving you all the nutrients you need, that's a pretty competitive price and a pretty um, good. I mean, you need that much. So not selling lifetime multivitamins, but this is one brand and giving you kind of an example of what you're looking for. All right, so we made it. Just one more my kind of um, parting term here is, good nutrition and consistent training are the foundation to getting you there. But getting out on the course, it takes more than that, right? Like I've seen people who eat well and train, and just for whatever reason it's just not their day. That's what I love about the marathon. Like there's no other event or sporting challenge that I've ever had that asks as much of you, and it's that's why it's such an accomplishment. It's such an awesome accomplishment, because it takes that mental strength and a lot of heart to do it. So my email's on there. I know I was like kind of zipping through stuff pretty quick there. Definitely feel free to email me. I do nutrition coaching, so if somebody wanted to like get more in depth to a meal plan, definitely would do that. And also doing like a discount for charity runners too, so 25% discount on nutrition coaching.
Yeah, and thanks, Tom. And I'll just double down on that. And then what we'll do is we'll open it up for a few minutes for people on the webinar to ask any questions they might have. But so that 25% discount, Tom, if you are looking to dial in your nutrition, and nutrition is obviously, as we just learned, if we didn't already know, is such a huge part of training and having a successful training season, certainly a successful race experience. So if you're looking to hone in your nutrition and kind of take that to the next level, if maybe you're experiencing issues, I encourage you to reach out to Tom. And if you determine that it's right for you, that you want to work with Tom more in depth and you want to work with him one-on-one, he is offering that 25% discount for most of the people that are on the webinar right now are running for the various charities that Kopf Running supports. So that discount's going to be good through really the end of next week. So I would say with that, we're going to open it up to questions. So if you do have a question, comment, or concern, go ahead right now and type that into the message box, chat box. Tom can see those questions, so he'll be able to address those.
Ooh, pre-workout. So that's a good one. So pre-workout can mean a lot of things. I know that there's some crazy stuff
So
out
Tom,
there.
let's just real quick, if you wouldn't mind, let's repeat the question. I think that Brian asked, just so that everybody can see, because I'm not quite sure the folks that are going to listen to the recording will see the question.
Okay. So Brian asked, what's your take on pre-workout powder used before a training run or long run? So pre-workout there's a lot of different things. I know that there's some crazy products out there. Generally, they're going to be pretty heavy in stimulants. If you see a product and it has like 19 different things in it and you don't know what most of those are, probably not a good option. Generally, like a little bit of caffeine before a run is not necessarily a bad thing. I think I err on the side. I was having this conversation this morning. I was doing speed work today, and I took like a pre-workout, and it's a mild one. It has basically it's got a little bit of caffeine in it. Like it's instead of having like a cup of coffee, I might do that, which is not going to be harmful to our health as long as you don't have any heart conditions that would suggest you don't do that. But I would be a little careful on the kind and also like if you're just looking for a little bit of a boost pre-workout, a cup of coffee is good too if you tolerate that. But if if it just gives you a little bit of a boost and help, then I'm totally fine with it. And that might be one where like a one-off where if you do have concerns, shoot me an email and I'll look it up and give you my feedback on it. And then Susanna said, what about taking salt tablets during the run? I think like one thing to think about is how salty of a sweater you are. So, and if you are a salty sweater, you probably know what I mean because you've had like the white like caking in your shirt when you're done, like the lines of salt. That person probably is definitely going to need a salt tablet. Typically, if your hydration drink has about 200 milligrams per cup, and you're consuming a decent amount of that fluid, we probably the salt tablet's probably in the fluid. It's not going to be bad, and I know like if somebody takes a salt tablet on a hot day and they feel better, then I wouldn't deter them from not doing it. But I don't typically go out and tell people we need additional salt tablets for everybody. I think you can get the sodium from your sports drink in general.
Do we have? Oh, here we go. Brian's got another question there.
So Brian said I have heard from other marathoners that many runners use too many goos during a run because of the sugar content. What's the recommended amount? Typically, the ultimate goal on carbohydrate intake would be about 1 gram of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight. So like basically divide your weight by 2, or I'm sorry, around 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour. Most people are not doing that much, so it's pretty unlikely that they're hitting 60 grams per hour. A GU is about 25. If you're tired in a run, so you're like, oh my gosh, I'm tired, I'm gonna do a GU, and then I'm still tired, so I'm gonna do another one. That's probably not gonna help. So I like sports drinks a little bit more than the GUs because the sports drink is it's spread out a little bit more. Like the GU is 25 grams of carbohydrates in one kind of bolus shot that your stomach has to deal with, versus if it's in a sports drink, it's spread out. Now, if you're doing a point-to-point run and you have to carry that with you, then that's going to be tough, right? And I'm like, it's easy for me to say, but if I had to carry 2 big bottles of fluid with me, that would be hard. So that's where the GU comes in. If you could do GU and there's a water stop where you can get water, then that's the equivalent. So I don't think I think some people do overdo it. I don't think you need to be doing GU if you're doing a 45-minute jog on a on a recovery day. But ultimately, to answer your question, I guess the recommended amount is going to be between 30 and 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour of activity.
Okay, so we're gonna give it another couple minutes, just in case there's any final questions we get in there, and before we turn Tom loose. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and type those in now. So as we wrap up here, everybody, this webinar, the recording will be available, and it will be included in your weekly training and nutrition tip that you'll be receiving in your email inbox early next week. You can also go to the Kopf Running YouTube page and find the replay. But before we set off here, it looks like we have another question. Andrew asks, what is an example of a low residue meal before the marathon, Tom?
Um, just think low fiber. Um, Something that because like uh like Rice Krispies. Rice Krispies would be a very low residue, like Rice Krispies with some almond milk, because we're going to dissolve all of that, and there's not going to be a whole lot left. Like if you had like a real high fiber bread, like there's a lot of fiber in there, and like if you have a high fiber meal, you go to the bathroom the next day, there's a lot of bulk there, right? So versus if we have low residue, low fiber diet, there's not a lot left after digesting it. So like Rice Krispies and almond milk with banana maybe, or rice. That's why I was mentioning rice, because brown rice is going to be a little bit high residue, but white rice or like juice is already, there's not much there. So just think low fiber.
So looks like we got another question from Brian. Yeah, you're welcome, Andrew. He asks, many say to eat 2 hours prior to a long run. Is this true in the sense that I must wake at 3 a.m. in order to begin my run at 5?
No, please do not wake up at 3 a.m. Think of so if you're going to have a more of a complex meal, you want to do that 2 hours prior. Like if you were going to have sweet potatoes and chicken breast um, with some asparagus, we'd do that 2 hours prior. If it gets, the closer it gets, the simpler it needs to be. So if we're 30 minutes prior, that's where a granola bar will be fine, because you'll be able to digest that in that amount of time. I know that for me, like I've definitely had days where, I don't know why this jumps into my memory, but I remember getting up. I had to wake up at like 4:45 for a run, and that's about as much as I could tolerate at that time. So, waking up at 4:40 was just not an option. So I got up at 4:43. I brewed some coffee, and I put some white table sugar in my coffee, just so that I could have some something in my system that's not going to take me less than 3 minutes to get out the door. So I slammed that, and then I was out by 4:47. So but just think that the closer you go, the simpler it needs to be. And I would rather see somebody do like a real simple granola bar, or some like Rice Krispies cereal, or like a Rice Krispies treat, even like do a Rice Krispies treat at 20 minutes before their run, then have to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, we're crazy enough getting up for a 5 a.m. run. So
Absolutely. Hallelujah is right, Brian. All right, everybody. Well, hey, we are right at an hour and a half, so we're going to go ahead and end things now. Tom's email is obviously included in this, so if you have any questions that didn't get answered tonight, go ahead and shoot him an email. He's more than happy to answer those for you. And again, if you do want to take your nutrition to the next level and really focus in on your nutrition throughout training and building up into race day, consider working with Tom. There's a nice little discount there for all Kopf running athletes through the end of next week. And with that, I want to thank Tom for joining us tonight and sharing his expertise. I think there's some really great information. And I encourage all of you to check out the recording. If something didn't quite click or make sense, this is going to be a living, breathing thing out there, so you can check it out on the YouTube page. But with that said, thank you, Tom. Thanks for all the great information, and thank you to all of you for doing what you do and supporting the great causes. For those of you who are running for charity, and until next time, enjoy all your runs and good luck. Thanks, guys.
thanks.